Hello, pantry stalkers. Today we are dehydrating ginger root and sweet potatoes. Now, the two of them don't really have anything to do with each other, except that they both needed to be done before they go bad. In fact, I had bought more ginger root, probably at least twice to three times the amount that I have here. And I kept putting off dehydrating it because I was going to make a video of it and I didn't have time. So anyway, this is just what I have left, which is fine because I don't use a ton of ginger, but I love having it on hand for when I'm cooking any type of Asian food, so like Indian food or Chinese food, stir fry, Thai food, all kinds of Asian food. Ginger is great in. It's also very good to just brew a tea with it if you have a cold or a cough. So it's kind of nice to have on hand for that as well. So what I've done is I have cut off any of the bad parts at the end that they get kind of dry. I'll put up a picture of ginger root in case you're not familiar with it. But anyway, in the book, The Dehydrating Cookbook by Tammy Gangla, she says that you don't need to peel the ginger before dehydrating, which is really good news because when I've done it in the past, I've peeled it, and that is, it's just kind of a pain to peel. So anyway, all that I've done is I washed it real good and I have sliced it, and I am going to dehydrate it, and then I'm going to grind it up to kind of a coarse grind. You can buy ginger powder in, like a spice section of a grocery store. But when you do it from ginger that you have dehydrated yourself, you can see there's all these fibers. And no matter how much we grind it at home, it will not come out to a powder. And that's okay. And in fact, what I have experienced with ginger that I dehydrate myself and grind up, or in the past I've cut it, minced it, and then dehydrated it, is that it actually tastes a whole lot like fresh ginger when I'm using it in stir fries and stuff, whereas ginger powder really doesn't. So this isn't a direct replacement for ginger powder that you buy in the store, but in my opinion, it tastes a lot better. So just don't expect it to be exactly the same. This is going to taste, even when it's dehydrated and used in cooking, it will taste a lot more like fresh ginger root, which I think is a real plus. Okay, so I'm going to start off by just putting it onto a tray. Okay, so I apologize for the light that's shining. I'm doing this at night, and so there's just no way around that. But I'm just going to put it all out onto this tray. I'm using a fruit leather sheet because I'm going to be using my mesh sheets for the sweet potatoes, or at least for part of them, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But right now I just want to talk a little bit about using this ginger. When I have used it in cooking, I have not rehydrated it first. I just have the kind of ground up powder, and I just cook it in with oil that, whatever I'm kind of sauteing, like if I'm sauteing onions or meat or other things, I just saute the ginger, put the dried ginger in with it, and that's all that I do with it. So it's very, very convenient. Another great thing that I love about dehydrating ginger myself is, rather than buying ginger root at the store, is that often a recipe will call for like an inch of ginger or half an inch, something like that. And when you walk into the store and you get ginger, usually it's a pretty good sized piece, and I always ended up having ginger go bad. So the dehydrating it is just a great way to have it on hand when you need it in your cooking. So I'm going to go ahead and pop this into the dehydrator. I'm not going to start the dehydrator until I get the sweet potatoes going. Okay, so here are my sweet potatoes. This is 3 pounds of sweet potatoes, and I have already cooked them. I boiled them and just until they're fork tender, so they're not like mushy, but they're definitely cooked all the way through. And I'm going to prepare these. I'm going to dehydrate these in 2 different ways. I'm going to slice half of them, and the other half of them I'm going to mash up and use them to be able to make mashed sweet potatoes in the future. So I cooked them all together, and obviously the ones that are smaller cooked faster because they're smaller. And so I'm going to use those for the mashed ones because I think they'll mash up easier. And then the ones that are cooked through but aren't as soft, I'm going to slice because I think them not being quite as soft will make them slice better. So I'm separating them out like so. What I have here is I just have a bowl that I'm going to put the peels in, and after they're peeled I'm going to just dump them into this bowl. And so I'm just cutting off the edge and just kind of scoring it, and hopefully the peel will come. You can see that it'll come right off. This is one huge advantage of cooking them with the peel on, is that, you know, it's a little bit of work to peel sweet potatoes, but when you cook them with the peel on, it's pretty easy to take them off. So I'm just going to peel each of them. And then once they're peeled, I'm going to put them into the bowl and we'll mash them up. So I'm going to bring you back when they are all peeled, and then we'll mash them. Okay, so I don't have any water or anything in them. I've just peeled them and I've just cut them up. And I do have a little bit of water here because I want to be able to blend them really smoothly. And obviously with dehydrating, I'm going to be taking all the water out. So I don't want to put a bunch of unnecessary water in. But if I can't get them smooth without adding water, I'll add a little bit of water at a time. I'm going to put just a little bit of water. Okay, so they're definitely more clumpy than I want. So again, just a tiny bit of water. And by the way, I'm not putting any type of seasoning, no salt, no butter, nothing like that. Just straight sweet potatoes. And then they can be used in whatever way that I decide to use them. So obviously you don't want to put fats and things anyway into food that you're dehydrating because it can go rancid. And then with the seasonings, I think it's just better to wait until you're actually going to prepare them. So let me go ahead and get these blended up. Okay, I think they're probably about as smooth as I'm going to get them. So now I'm going to spread them onto a dehydrator sheet, onto one of the fruit leather sheets. Okay, I don't want this to be any more than about 1/4 of an inch thick, but I think that this, since I'm doing such a small amount, I think that this one tray will be enough. And then, if needed, I'll have 4 trays that I can use on my sliced sweet potatoes, which I might not need that many, but okay. Now I'm just going to do my best to just smooth them out. I actually think I'm going to see how it'll work with my hands. Yeah, sometimes your hands are the best tool, and obviously before I started working on this, I washed my hands real good, so my hands are definitely working better than the spatula was. Okay, so that's great. I'd say it's roughly 1/4, probably not even 1/4 of an inch thick. So that's perfect for one tray. I'm going to go ahead and pop that into the dehydrator, and then I'll peel the rest of the sweet potatoes and slice them up and put them onto trays. Okay, so I have my 4 sweet potatoes, and I'm just going to start slicing them. I'm going to slice them as, you know, reasonably thin, probably around 1/4 of an inch thick. That end piece was a little bit thicker, but I want them to dry well. And let me kind of smooth stuff around here so I don't keep getting my arm in the way of the camera, I hope. Let's see. Try to have it where you can see what I'm doing. If you hear that noise, that's the heater going. We actually had a really cold day today. I'm in Southern California, and it doesn't really get cold here relative to a lot of other places in the winter. But it was a real cold, rainy day today, and my mom, my elderly mom that we're here with, she has just gone to bed, and so heater's going, and we're all nice and cozy, but I know that does make kind of a noise in the background, so I apologize for that. Okay, I'm not going to make you watch me slice all of these. Probably move the camera over where you can see a little better. And I'll bring you back when I get the rest of them all sliced up. Okay, so I ended up with 3 full trays of the sliced sweet potatoes and then the 1 tray of the mashed sweet potatoes. And then, of course, I have the ginger as well. So I'm going to dehydrate these at 125 degrees. You can see the last time I used this was 95 degrees because I was doing greens. I was doing kale, and so I had it a really low temperature. So that's why I was at 95 last time. And so I'm going to set it for 14 hours because it should take, about that long. All right, and I'm just going to push start, and there it goes. And I'm going to let this run overnight, and obviously it's close to bedtime now, so it'll still be going when I get up in the morning, but it is expected to take 12 to 14 hours, and if anything, I like to over dehydrate things. So I will show you what they're like when they're done. I'll let you know how long it took altogether. And I'm also going to reconstitute a small amount of the mashed sweet potatoes for you so you can see how much water it takes to reconstitute them and what they taste like. So I will see you tomorrow. Hello everyone. I just wanted to show you the finished sweet potatoes. I have 3 trays that are about this size. That was from, I would say, approximately 2 pounds of sweet potatoes. Remember that I started with 3 pounds of sweet potatoes and I mashed part of them, but they were the smaller ones. So I'm just guesstimating that I sliced about 2 pounds of sweet potatoes and mashed 1 pound. So I'm going to go ahead and just put all of these into a dish. Actually, hold on, let me get a mason jar so that we'll be able to measure how much we ended up with. I can tell these definitely aren't going to fill up a quart, but I just had a quart sitting right by me nearby, so I figured I'd grab that. Okay, so that's 1 tray. Here's the second tray. I'm going to guesstimate that I'm going to end up with about a pint of sliced sweet potatoes. By the way, these took around 14 hours for the slices. The mashed sweet potatoes were done easily in 10 or 12 hours, but these are the sliced ones took about 14 hours. And you can tell the color is still very vibrant. They look wonderful. Okay, and here's the third tray. Okay, and as suspected, got about a half. I'm not sure if these would fit into a pint jar. If so, it would be pretty tight. But I think that it's pretty easily about a pint of sweet potatoes. So now let's go on to the mashed sweet potatoes. So here's the tray of mashed sweet potatoes, and you can see that they stick, but it's not horrible. So I think I am just going to have to work at tearing them off, and I'm going to work on that rather than making you watch, because it might be a little bit tedious. I'll tear all of them off, put them into a bowl, and then bring you back. Okay, it did take me a few minutes to get it off, but I just kind of bent the tray, the plastic tray, and it peeled off pretty easily. So I'm just going to put all of it into this mini chopper. I want to powder it, but I'm not worried about if it's a super fine powder. I mean, it doesn't have to be perfect, but I want to grind it up into a decent powder. I think that it will mix up better, plus, of course, it will store very, very easily in a small space. So let me just fill up this chopper and I'll blend it up and we'll see how it turns out. Okay, so here's the ginger. You can see how much it shrunk up. You can also see how there's fibers like this, and this will not turn into a fine powder like you would get when you do like when you buy ginger powder in the store. But I have to tell you, it'll taste great, and so I'm very happy about it. Let's go ahead and put it into the coffee grinder. All right, smells good. Let me take a look. Okay, we have some powder and we have some pieces, some chunks. So actually it's powdering better than I expected it to powder. It's not quite as strong as when you grind up peppers, but ginger is pretty powerful stuff. So I think I am going to try sifting it a little bit and then putting the bigger pieces back in. I'll be right back. All right, so there we have some very fine powder, much finer than I was anticipating. And I'm going to put this back in and see what I can do with it. And if there's some chunks in it, it's going to be fine. One thing I want to point out is that the reason I sifted this was not so much to get a fine powder, even though that was kind of a nice result. It was more to be able to separate out these bigger pieces so I can put them in again rather than continuing to grind the stuff that's already ground up. Okay, you can see it still didn't want to grind all the way, and it could just be that those are the more fibrous pieces. I'm just going to dump them in with the rest and consider that done. So we'll go ahead and I'm going to measure it into this, or pour it into this. This is obviously, it just had mushrooms in it. It's been cleaned out real good, and I'm just going to put that inside there. All right, and I'll probably want to find an even smaller jar for this because you can see it's not very much. But that'll be awesome when I'm wanting to do any type of Asian type cooking. Okay, now let's go back to the sweet potatoes, and I'm just going to show you these so you can see what they're like. They're kind of like, I don't know what size to even, they're kind of like very fine, small, flat pebbles. I don't really know how else to describe it. But I'm going to go ahead and see if I can get them a little bit finer than this. Okay, that's actually getting really good, really good. I'm going to just let it rest for a minute, and then I'll do that a couple more times, and then I will show you the final result. Okay, here's what I ended up with. You can see that there are some chunks in there. I probably could have ground it up finer, but part of the deal is that I'm doing this kind of late at night and my family's in bed, so I don't want to run the grinder too much. But I'm going to see about reconstituting it now. I have 3 tablespoons of hot water here, and I'm going to put in a tablespoon of the sweet potatoes. I might need more than that. Yeah, it's looking pretty watery. So let me put in, actually though it's thickening up because as the sweet potato rehydrates, it's soaking up the water. So I'm going to actually just pause the video and let it sit for a couple of minutes, and then I'll decide if I need to add in more sweet potatoes. So again, I put 3 tablespoons of hot water, 1 tablespoon of sweet potatoes, and I'm actually thinking that's going to end up being, you know, a decent ratio. But we'll see. I'll bring you back in just a few minutes. Hey, I've waited only about a minute, and I think they're actually kind of a nice consistency. And let me go ahead and take a taste of them now. And these are actually very good. I didn't put butter, I didn't put salt, I didn't put anything on them. They're just the straight sweet potatoes. And they're very, very tasty. I did taste a couple of little bits that were a little bit hard, not as rehydrated as I'd like. So I think it probably will be worth grinding this up into a powder, a little better powder. But it's definitely workable. Yeah, it's definitely workable, but I wouldn't want to use more water to better rehydrate those bigger pieces, because then it would be more soupy than I want it to be. So I do think that the best course of action is to go ahead and grind it into as fine of a powder as you can, and then it really does rehydrate wonderfully. So these are delicious. So anyway, I hope that you enjoyed this video. I hope that you'll give making sweet potatoes, dehydrating sweet potatoes, and dehydrating ginger, your homemade ginger powder, a try. When I've done ginger before, I just minced it up real fine and then dehydrated and didn't grind it at all. And I had read from others that you can't get a fine powder, but I feel like we got a pretty good powder here. The only thing I would caution you on this is I think it's way stronger than commercial ginger powder, and so if you're using it in a recipe, I would definitely start off light, you know, maybe using 1/4 or at the most 1/2 of what the recipe calls for, and then adapting to taste as you figure out what works for you. Well, I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, I'd appreciate it if you would like the video, and if you haven't already done so, if you would subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great day.